The left in America has developed something that's very much like the woke church's Bible. So the woke church, or sometimes it's called the so-called gay gospel, they have their own set of beliefs, their own Bible. In their Bible, Jesus never speaks of marriage. So in their Bible, Jesus didn't say, and therefore a man leaves his mother and father and clings into his wife. Jesus didn't say that save in cases of adultery or ongoing sexual perversion, a man should not leave his wife. And he was responding to what the Pharisees have said about certificates of divorce, and Jesus made it harder. He said, you've heard it said that a man will not divorce his wife without a certificate of divorce, and yet I tell you, except for cases of ongoing sexual perversion or adultery, a man shall not leave his wife. So he spoke of marriage. Furthermore, Jesus was raised on the Old Testament, or what we think of as the Old Testament, parts of it. That's the Bible Jesus read. But in the gay gospel, so-called, the woke churches, Jesus never spoke of those things. Throughout the Bible, God is referred to as he. He's always referred to in a masculine sense. There are some times where he shares some characteristics with women. There's a particular phrase he uses for special helper. He talks about women being provided to man as a special helper, and God describes himself as a special helper, which is a way of honoring women, but it's a role. It's not an identity. Throughout the Bible, God is he. In the woke church, God is non-binary. How did they get there? Because they just decided they got there. They have mentally rewritten the Bible, and in some case, they've rewritten it. There is an ungendered version of the Bible that uses phrases like birthing person and cervix haver rather than mother or father. Rewriting the Bible doesn't change the Bible. The Bible's unchanged. If you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls from that time when we discovered those scrolls till now, the Bible's about 99.8% intact, and the places that it's different are spelling errors where people transcribed differently. So the left has done this with the Bible. They've also done it with the Constitution. And I don't know that they even read the Constitution anymore. I think they just think of this magic Constitution in their mind. I mean, Jonathan Capehart does this. The judges who are ruling against Trump does this. And we can compare this and their concept of their Constitution for them versus the Constitution they want to employ on other people. See, their Constitution applies to them. The real Constitution applies to us sometimes. Because when you're dealing with lawless people, there can be no consistency. So I'll give you some examples of this here in just a second. Now, I'm not saying it's lawless that your bank doesn't tell you that they haven't actually given you corporate credit. I'm not saying that. But if you're a small or medium-sized business owner and you have a corporate credit card or a debit card, that does not mean you have corporate credit. In all likelihood, your bank got your personal financial information when you applied for that, meaning your house, your retirement account, your business, your kids' college funds, that backs that credit card. They're wedded. So if, God forbid, some insane leftist comes along to sue you, or there's a slip and fall, or you make a legitimate mistake, your house, your retirement account are at risk. My friends at Visible will help change that. They'll put up a firewall that is known as the corporate veil so that people have to sue your business, not you. It indemnifies to the greatest degree possible your personal assets, and they'll do this in 7 easy steps. They'll do 90% of the work for you, and they'll give you a free, no obligation consultation. And I guarantee after that consultation, you will have learned something about your business's corporate credit rating, because it exists, and you learned something about what you should do. Here's their website. It's gobizable.com. gobizable.com. The left and their new constitution, this is Jonathan Capehart from PBS, who's determined there's a constitutional right that certain organizations have to your money.
Jonathan, what do you make of the president's moves at this time? Not just about PBS. This is not just about us. It's part of a larger campaign here.
Right. But I think what the president is doing, it is a fundamental attack on our Constitution, on the foundation of this country. People need to understand and remember, there is only one profession that is protected in the Constitution, and it is the free press. It is the press. And why? Because the founders understood that the survival of a democracy depends on an informed citizenry. And the citizenry can only be informed by a press that can report and report on the affairs of the republic free and unfettered. And whether they are, come from the left or from the right, the government should not interfere with that reporting. And so when you have a president of the United States who is making it his mission to attack the free press, we should all be concerned, whether we are at PBS or whether we are at MSNBC, because he's focused on us too.
Well, I know we'll all continue to do our work without fear or favor.
Yes, without favor. Certainly MSNBC is very famous for without favor, so is PBS, just straight down the middle. Obviously, well, no, that's a lie. But let's take this Constitution in Jonathan Capehart's mind. The First Amendment refers to a free press, a profession. It does? So the pamphleteers in the United States, prior to the Revolutionary War, who created pamphlets for people to read to become informed, were reporters. They were professional writers. People like Sam Adams. They were informing the public, certainly, about what the Crown was doing, but they weren't journalists. Most of them didn't go on to form newspapers and media companies. The freedom of the press was the freedom to use the tools of communication to communicate broadly. It's not about a profession. It's about a right given us by God and technologies that existed. Reminder, it is PBS and Jonathan Capehart and MSNBC who continue to sponsor censorship against conservatives because of so-called hate speech or so-called conspiracy theory. President Trump isn't attacking PBS's right to exist. He's simply saying that while you are creating biased news and you're refusing to report on things that are significant to elections and you are trying to sway elections using taxpayer money, you're not going to get any more of it. PBS has corporate underwriting now. So PBS can exist without this. But in the mind of Jonathan Capehart, they have a constitutional right to our money. And if he's speaking here about the First Amendment, and he is, and he's saying that because the free press is important, the government must fund it, the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If you were to take Jonathan Capehart's so-called logic and apply it there, that means that the government has to buy our guns. Because it says right there, a well-regulated militia is important. The right of the people, that's us, to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If the First Amendment says journalists are important, therefore PBS should get tax dollars, it says that a well-armed citizen base is important, therefore the government should buy our guns. Where do I sign up? Oh, I forget. That's right. I don't want a government that is strong enough to give me everything I want, because a government like that is strong enough to take everything I have. Here's another example of this invented constitution in the minds of the left, just like the woke church has invented a false Bible. A judge has ruled that President Trump pulling security clearance from a law firm is unconstitutional. President signed an executive order in March that pulled the security clearance from some of the firm's staff, claiming the law firm engaged in dishonest and dangerous activity and essentially barred its attorneys from federal buildings. This comes from Just the News, John Solomon's organization. The law firm here is Perkins Coie. Now, if you understand the media reports about Perkins Coie and you've studied this, Perkins Coie was effectively laundering money. Hillary Clinton was pretending to pay for legal services when in fact she was paying for things, as I understand it, like media buying, the creation of the false Russia dossier. That's not legal services. Those are media services. Those are black oppo, opposition study researches. Black op meaning secret. Secondly, they participated in some of the hoaxing of the electorate, a law firm lying to the electorate. President Trump does have control over who has security clearances. And suddenly, though, there's a constitutional right for Perkins Coie to be able to have the nation's biggest secrets because they've proven themselves to be so good with them. There's a reason that the left says, no whataboutisms. You don't get to do whataboutisms. They say that because they know they are doing that of which they accuse us. So they don't want us to have the tool of whataboutisms, and whataboutisms are incredibly important. Here's a key whataboutism. You're driving home one night, you drive into your driveway, your front door is kicked open. And you call the police. Hey, I think someone might be in my house. Why do you think that? Because my front door is kicked open and it wasn't when I left. Hey, that's a whataboutism. Don't you come to us with comparisons, but I'm going to give comparisons. Do you remember this in 2021? Breaking in 2021. In landmark accountability victory, John Eastman now faces permanent disbarment over his attempt to overturn the 2020 election. So John Eastman was a lawyer for President Trump who represented his client's best interests. And in John Eastman's judgment, there was a lot about the election that needed to be looked into. Lawyers aren't allowed to do that. Did you know that? They're not allowed to represent clients. If clients have inconvenient ideas, they don't have that constitutional right of free speech, freedom of association, which Jonathan Capehart says PBS has to such a degree that we have to pay for it. Rudy Giuliani faced a verdict because he said some things about Georgia election workers, and he named them, and he shouldn't have. They're ordinary workers, but the jury amount given them?
NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian has been covering this trial, and he joins me now. So this is a huge sum. Ken, break down the takeaway here and what it means.
It's a stunning verdict, Kristen. It drew audible gasps in the courtroom, and it exceeded even what the plaintiffs were asking for and what their expert witness said their damages were. So the jury awarded each woman a different figure in compensation for defamation. Ruby Freeman was awarded $16.2 roughly million. Her daughter Shay Moss was awarded $16.9 million. Then the jury awarded each of them $20 million for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and then a total of $75 million for punitive damage, which is designed to punish Mr. Giuliani for the harm that he caused.
All of this, they said, to keep President Trump in power. $148 million. No offense to those women. All work is honorable work unless you are, in fact, dishonorable. And I think the Georgia election case is deeply dishonorable. But their earning capacity in their lives is $148 million. Really? This seems a bit extreme, and yet that's what the jury ruled. So when the left invents their own constitution, they are saying that the free speech of PBS is sacrosanct, that they have a right to our nation's monies. They're saying that Perkins Coie, a disgraced law firm, has a constitutional right to our secrets, our nation's biggest secrets. But when it comes to President Trump's team, people like John Eastman speaking his mind in the First Amendment as a lawyer representing his client, he doesn't have that. People like Steve Bannon, who refused to reply or comply with a subpoena by an illegally constructed team at the Congress, the Jan 6 committee, which was illegally constructed because he didn't play by the House rules. When he didn't respond to that, he went to jail. It's an amazing thing. When you invent your own constitution, you can change it with the turn of a dime. Just like when you invent your own Bible, you can do something fascinating. You can remove the Word of God from the Word of God. Except understand this, God will not be mocked. You haven't succeeded in mocking him. You've succeeded in painting yourself into an eternal corner, one you're going to have forever to mourn.